It's my pleasure to welcome you to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I am your host for tonight, Mary Jane Calderon, joining you from the Education Center at Behringer-Crawford Museum. Also joining me as our presenter for this evening, Bill Fowler, and my assistant for this evening, BCM Visitor Services Associate Heather Cook. So thank you both for being here. Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's history museum, that would not be possible without support. Thank you to all of our sponsors, including the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, Kentucky Arts Council, Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, and our members. If you are not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining for access to discounts and exclusive programming. Learn more and join at bcmuseum.org. So let's go ahead and meet tonight's presenter. Bill Fowler is a former Kentucky resident of over 20 years and holds a BS degree from Virginia Tech and an MBA from Xavier University. His career in the transportation industry spans more than 45 years, including roles as Chief Operating Officer of First Vehicle Services, Vice President for Ryder PTS, and Director for Conway. He also served as a major in the U.S. Army. Though technically retired, Bill remains active as an amateur historian, motivational speaker, and author of 2 books. He and his wife, Angela, reside in Batavia, Ohio, and are proud parents of 6 children, grandparents to 8, and great-grandparents to 1. Oh, my. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We would love to hear from our viewers tonight, so if you have a question or a comment to share, please type it in the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will be sure to get to those at the end of the presentation. Now to the fun part. We have a quiz question. The first respondent to enter a correct answer in the chat on Zoom or Facebook Live wins a Northern Kentucky History Hour prize, and most importantly, bragging rights. So tonight's question is, how long did it take the 66-year-old author to ride the 3,500 miles? So go ahead and get those answers in the chat. And Heather, we will stop sharing our screen and then I will start sharing in just 1 second. We will share. And we will get to the presentation. And we should be good. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Mary. And welcome, everyone. As you see, we will be exploring Kentucky and a lot of the United States by bicycle. It's the story of a grandfather, me, on a 3,500-mile bicycle ride across the United States. And we thank Behringer-Crawford Museum as our sponsor tonight. To start with, a little confusion. I have 1 book under 2 titles. So if you see either one of these titles, the inside is all the same. The cover is different because my wife didn't like my original cover and I wanted to make her happy. So we did a second publishing of it. But anyway, the story itself is about a 66-year-old guy who recently retired, who's not really a big bicyclist, but he does ride a bicycle all across the United States. The unique aspect of it is he's all by himself. There are tour groups that do this occasionally that have chase vehicles and people along to help them. I did it all by myself with no one along in case anything happened. It was a big adventure, a bit of a travel log, since I talk about a lot of the things I did along the way, the history, the people I met, and such. So, oops, there we go. Now, why did I do such a crazy thing? When I retired, I liked different challenges, and I had just gotten back into bicycling, and I decided a 500-mile bicycle ride, which would be about a week, would be a neat challenge. So I was looking at some different rides that I might do. Same time I was doing that, my grandson, Logan, had been diagnosed with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. This is a muscle wasting disease that affects a small group of young boys, only boys. And what it does is your muscles, as you wear them out, it replaces them. In their case, the muscles never replace. So as he wears out muscles, they go away. So things like your lungs, your hearts, things like that. And most boys with this disease don't make it much past their 20s. So as I was looking at that, I thought, well, if I could take this ride and turn it into a opportunity to both get the word out about Duchenne's and as well raise money for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So that's the way it morphed from a 500-mile ride to a 3,500-mile ride. And by the way, There's a more current picture of Logan. He is now totally confined to a wheelchair, but still a very active and handsome young man. Now, as I looked at this, I had several opportunities about which routes to take, and quite frankly, none of them were very promising. This was one I looked at. This is the Bicycle Route 76. It came together in our bicentennial in 1976, starts out in Yorktown, ends up in Astoria, Washington State, going across the country, and this is the route. It actually goes through Kentucky for about 600 miles, and on my trip, I ended up riding about 200 miles of that 600 miles in Kentucky. I hit a couple of other sections also, but the road itself didn't start with, it wasn't all that great. It didn't go to places where I wanted to go, so I did not choose to follow this directly. There is another, if you're into bicycling, it's the Great American Rails to Trail. Rails to Trail is, they take old railroad beds and convert them into dedicated bicycle and pedestrian ways where no traffic is allowed on. Kind of like our Loveland Bicycle Trail if you're local to Northern Kentucky. However, this trail is less than half completed right now, so it wasn't an option for my trip. I also looked at, I would have loved to have recreated Lewis and Clark's Corps of Discovery adventure as they first people that crossed the western portion of the United States. Stephen Ambrose's book, Undaunted Courage, is a great retelling of that story. However, it too, the roads were not compatible with what I needed to do with a bicycle, although I was able to patch some of their trail into my endeavor. Long and short of it, this is the route I chose. It was summer when I did it, so I wanted to go at a more northern latitude, and that's what you see created here. I started out in Anacordia, Washington State, and ended up in Hampton, Virginia, which coincidentally is my hometown growing up, and I thought it was poetic. I ended at Old Point Comfort, and believe me, it was very comforting when I got to that point. So the next thing I had to do was come up with my equipment and supplies. This was my steed that as I rode across the country. And what you see on there is everything I needed to support me for 2 months, with the exception of water and food. I carried about a half day's supply of water with me, and I carried usually a day and a half to 2 days of supply of food, but I tried to eat as I rode along as much as possible. But what you see there, I have my tent, my sleeping bag, extra clothing, electrical equipment, repair kits, everything, bare minimum, everything I needed to support myself for 2 months on the road. Because of that, a lot of things I had to have multi-purposes. Every evening, if I found water, I would wash the clothes that I had worn that day and myself. And as you see here, I use my bicycle as my clothesline a lot of time. There were other things that I had, again, multi-purposes to keep my load as light as possible. My entire load weighed less than 20 pounds. Now, if you've ever bicycled, a normal person, my height or weight usually consumes about 2,000 calories a day. On my trip, I needed about 6,000 calories a day to keep going. So what that meant was I usually ate 4 full meals a day, any number of stops for ice cream, snacks, trail mix, you name it. As an example, this is one evening meal that I sat down for. And if you can imagine, I ate all of that and got seconds on 2 or 3 of the dishes. So if you ever want to lose weight and eat as much as you want to, bicycle across the country. It's a great way. Now, we are blessed with a big, beautiful, very diverse country, and I got to see a lot of it up close and personal as you bicycle versus flying over it in an airplane or riding in a car. I started out in Anacordia and the first thing I started off with, I had to go across the Rockies, which was going to be the hardest bicycling I did in my entire trip. So that first 13 days, I covered 671 miles, but I climbed over 37,000 feet. Just as a point of reference, Mount Everest is only 29,000 feet. So during that first week, first 2 weeks, I literally was bicycling the height of Mount Everest. Excuse me. This is a picture of me as I start with my rear tire in the Pacific. My goal was to put my front tire in the Atlantic. And this is also a picture of my first campsite. Now, I had done a lot of research before taking this on. And one of the things I found out, if I tried to go from hotel to hotel, some days I'd only put in 20 miles. The next day I might have to put in 120 miles. So by taking camping gear with me, I could cut that theoretically in half. Sometimes I could camp, sometimes I could stay in hotels. This first night out, the only thing available was a campsite. As you can see, a very pretty one. They weren't all this nice. This is me as I'm approaching the Rockies, and you see the glaciers in the distance in the mountains. Pretty intimidating for a guy who had never bicycled more than, I'd say, 80 miles in his life. My days usually started before sunrise and all too often ran until the evening hours. And this is a picture of one of my morning rides and one of my evening sunsets. As I went through the Rockies, just absolutely beautiful. Matter of fact, I ended up going through Glacier National Park and several other parks. Very beautiful, very rugged, but very pretty. This is Moriah Pass, which is the Continental Divide. It's one of a number of passes that I went through. I chose this particular picture because, as you can see, it was over 100 degrees that day. And now, set as a backstop, when I said I did a lot of research, I had been advised that the passes, because of the high altitude and the glaciers, even during the summer, they, excuse me, can get hypothermic conditions. So I had winter clothing in my backpack or in my saddlebags. You don't know how comforting that made me as I traveled along at 100-degree temperature, knowing I had thermal underwear in my saddlebags to carry with me. As a record, the week or 2 weeks that I was there, that was a record-breaking temperature time for them. There wasn't a single day where it was less than 90 degrees, and many of the days were over 100 degrees. So it was a surprising start to my trip. That I should say, anyway. This is me as I stopped for a break and I looked back at the last of the Rockies. I was very happy to see them behind me at this point. I now had the flat plains to look forward to, and trust me, I was really looking forward to that. The plains consisted of about 13 days or 950 miles across Montana and North Dakota. And a surprising little tidbit, believe it or not, it is illegal to ride the interstates in certain parts of North Dakota. So I never dreamed I would have a bicycle on the interstate, but it was on the shoulder. But it was actually a nice way to get around on a bicycle. The first picture you see there, Indian Days, as I entered the Blackfoot Indian Reservation, I happened to arrive the day before their annual Indian Day celebrations. This is like a huge family party where the entire Blackfoot Indian Reservation tribe comes together for a week of festivities, dances, games, and everything. So I was literally on the edge of this campground the night that I arrived there. Every evening I was totally exhausted, but this one I didn't get a lot of sleep because these guys love to celebrate with fireworks. So into the wee hours of the morning, there were fireworks going on the whole time I was there. So I didn't get a lot of rest that night. The dinosaur you see there, to start with, the plains, the flat, grassy fields like that, hundreds of miles of this. Not only was it very hot and arid, but very boring too. So occasionally I would run across these steel dinosaurs, and it perplexed me to no end until I finally found out that this was a dinosaur trail. So one of the largest repository of dinosaur bones was on my trail, and I was able to hit that. And as you see there, a lot of very quaint cowboy towns around across. I also hit some incredible scenery. The Badlands, beautiful, not very friendly to bicycle across, and I can only imagine how disturbing it was for someone crossing on covered wagons to all of a sudden hit something like that. The plains, like I said, boring. Very seldom did I get cloud cover and a little rain like you see there, but it was very pretty. The next section I hit, I called the Midwest. This was Minnesota, Wisconsin, down into Illinois. My wife's family is from Minnesota, so I was looking forward to the chance to meet some relatives, which I did. But the state in general was not very hospitable to me. You see the little flag there that's just flapping violently in the breeze? That is a stationary bicycle it's sitting on. The wind for most of the days were incredible. It'd be 30, 40 miles an hour right in my face. And when you're only bicycling about 10 to 15 miles an hour and the wind is hitting you like that, it's more demoralizing than climbing one of those steep rocky mountains at a 4-mile-per-hour gait. I also had several days where it just poured rain. So the weather was inhospitable, to put me mildly. I teased my wife about was her family trying to keep me out of the state. But what days were nice, or when it was nice weather, there was some beautiful scenery. That's the Mississippi River in the background. And both states have a lot of rails to trails. Again, these are old railroad beds. They turn into bicycle trails. And for a guy who's been competing with traffic for 100 miles, to be able to ride on the trail and not have to worry about getting run over was an absolute joy. I also got to meet a lot of interesting people. On the left, you see there is Big Ollie. He's known in Alexandria as the America's biggest Viking. I'm not sure where they get that from, since it's pretty much in the heartland, but when I was there, he was getting a makeover. Now, the young lady to my right, Miss Wisconsin, she needed no makeover, but she was one of the several television crews that interviewed me as I went across the country. Delightful lady. She also ran for Miss America, and I'm disappointed to say she didn't win it. Next was the Ohio River Valley. I started off in Chicago, actually riding along riverfront there, and then went into cornfield after cornfield after cornfield. But the best part of this portion was I arrived back home, and I was greeted just short of home by a lot of family members and friends. It was a really delightful time. We had 2 or 3 news crews there to welcome me in, so it was a great time. And this created probably one of the hardest things of the whole trip. I was now 2/3 of the way finished with my trip, only a third left. And when I started, I didn't know what I was in for. At this point in time, I knew what I had left to face, and I really and truly did not want to go back out on the road. But after 2 days at home, I finally decided I'd made a commitment to finish it, so I did hit the road again. This led me into Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia. The Appalachians I went through were probably the worst roads I'd been on the whole trip. The mountains were not as bad as the Rockies, but even at that, I climbed over 14,000 feet in the week I was there. So that was like me bicycling over the Empire State Building almost every day. Very fatiguing. Kentucky, I'll hit a little later, but it was a beautiful roads and very welcoming. West Virginia, on the other hand, I just as soon, well, as I put it in my thing, if I never go on Highway 52 again in my life, it will be too soon. The fact that I lived through that is a testament that I'll get into a little later. Exiting there, I hit Virginia, and it's hard to see, but I'm just approaching the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia there. The East Coast from the time exited the Appalachians, in which the center picture there is me about Lynchburg, Virginia, looking over my shoulder at the last of the mountains that I would see on my trip. I did get to go through the Shenandoah Valley and the Blue Ridge Mountains, though, and these are just absolutely lovely. And the weather was perfect, could not have asked for any more. So it was a welcome change for some of the other riding I had been. The good news was I made it to the Atlantic. That's a picture of my front tire in the Atlantic at Old Point Comfort with the ride behind me, and that smile on my face was genuine. I was very happy to have that trip behind me. It was a unique experience, but one I would not want to do again. Now, on my trip, I'm an amateur historian. I love it, and every historical thing that I ran across, I had to stop. These are just a few that I saw. The Beckley Plantation there, I wanted to point out that one because one of the things, of many things it was famous for, they claimed to have had the first Thanksgiving in the New World. And everybody knows it was the Pilgrims that did that. So I took that with a grain of salt, got home and looked it up. And sure enough, 1 year before the Pilgrims landed, Settlers here landed, and by their charter had to do a Thanksgiving and make it a every year thing after that. So actually, Virginia holds the title for the first Thanksgiving in Virginia, of America. I passed any number of other historical things. The first English-speaking settlement, Jamestown, the Battle of Little Bighorn, where Custer was defeated, Appomattox Courthouse, where the Civil War ended. I even passed where Audie Murphy's died in a plane accident. And if you don't know, Audie Murphy was a famous movie star, but he was also the most highly decorated World War II veteran. Remarkable man. Oops, excuse me. One of the other things about my trip, which let me go back one more. Oh, there. No. Oh, I'm going forward instead of backward. Hold on a second. There we go. There we go. There. We have some incredible people in our country, and meeting them at a very slow pace on a bicycle, and a lot of people wondering what in the world is this old man doing. I got to meet a lot of interesting people. Start off with the two gentlemen you see in the left or the upper corner there. My bicycle, I had to pack it up and ship it out and have it assembled for me. So when I got there, it would be waiting for me. So I called the RAI store, arranged that. The gentleman goes, could I ask you a question? Why are you shipping your bicycle out here? And I told him what I was planning to do for my grandson. And he was very excited. He called me back the next day and goes, when are you arriving? And you've got to be getting in late from an airplane. I said, yes. And he goes, well, would you consider spending the night with my wife and I? She's a great cook. We can have supper. I'll pick you up at the airport. We'll bring you here, and I'll have your bicycle at my house ready for it to go. And I said, wow, that is really phenomenal. That would be great. The next day, he calls me back again. This time he goes, where are you going to start your ride? And I told him where I was going to start on the ocean. He goes, oh, no. You don't want to do that. You want to go up to Anacortes. That's the best place to start. And I said, well, that's a bit of a hike from where I will be. And he goes, well, me and my brother will haul you up there. We can camp with you the first night and ride with you the first few miles. So before I've even started my trip, here's somebody picking me up at the airport, putting my bicycle together, feeding me, transporting me. There was stories like that all along. The middle picture you see there was a restaurant I just stopped at one evening just as I was closing the day. Of course, once again, everybody's curious, why is this old man on a bicycle riding around? So pretty soon the owner of the restaurant's out, and she's talking with me, and she goes, where are you spending the night? And I mentioned where I was going. She goes, no. Why don't you camp in my courtyard beside the restaurant? We close early, and what I'll do, I'll leave the back door of the restaurant open, and you can just come in of the evening, use our bathing facilities, clean up, just make this your home for the evening. And by the way, you'll probably be gone before we come in of a morning, so just lock the back door when you leave. So here's a family or a lady who's never met me before. She's turning over her business to me. I had people open up their homes. I had people picking up my tab at restaurants before I could get up and pay. There's any number of just great hospitality that I experienced. I had a blog when I was doing it, and I would recount some of these stories. And one person on the blog said that my story of the people I was meeting on the way had restored his faith in humanity. So it was just a testimony to some of the wonderful people we have out there. Now, I know I've inspired you all to go get your Swin bicycle in the back of the garage and get it out and tune it up for this spring so you can take a long trip. But before you do that, let's think about something for just a second. You could get killed out there. It is not something I would recommend. These are some of the life-threatening experiences that I had. Like you see the dogs, I got chased. I don't know how many times. I was actually knocked off my bicycle twice by dogs. Storms, I've been hailed on, lightning, thunder, rain, you name it. The traffic, I'll get to them, the logging truck you see there in the Rockies, they would come by regularly, and I could hear them coming miles away, and I would literally just tense up because as they came by, the wind would literally blow me to one side of the road, and then as they passed me, the vortex behind would suck me back out into the road. And I was always scared silly there'd be somebody following them and would run over me as I pulled out the road. Water, though, that was probably the biggest challenge I had. I could carry enough water to last me about a half day in the hot weather that I was going through, which meant I had to be able to find water at least once or twice a day. And there were a couple of times where that didn't happen. And all I can say is the fact that I was rewarded with water was almost miracles. I'll touch on one of them a little later, but that was my biggest challenge, staying hydrated in that type of hot weather. The roads, like you see there, those were a terror to ride on because there was no shoulder. I had to get out in the traffic. Cars coming up behind me couldn't see me because of twists and turns and rises until they were right on me. And inevitably, they would, instead of slowing up, would try to speed up and pass by me in the hopes there wouldn't be a car coming the other way. The times that literally they have brushed by me within an inch or more goes up in the hundreds. So some days I was so stressed out from the traffic that I literally collapsed on the bed and fell asleep with my sweaty, dirty clothes on. Now, the big bear you see there, that was one evening. I'm climbing one of the mountains out in the Rockies. I had what they call a granny gear. I had 27 gears on my bicycle, so I'd get it down to the lowest gear possible, which meant I would be bicycling about 4 miles an hour, which is about what most people would walk, climbing these 6,000, 7,000 foot hills. Right as I'm getting up to the top of one of the hills, a guy that looks just like this walks out about 20 yards ahead of me. I stopped and put on the brakes. He looked over his shoulder at me, and I'm happy to say he was more afraid of me than I was of him. So he ran across the road and up the mountain. The problem was I had to go across the top of the mountain. So I was afraid I would run into him again. So to let him know where I was, I started singing to the top of my voice as I'm riding along. And either he was a music critic or just was going off in a different direction, but I never saw him again. And the one snake I see there, that was a token snake. One day I was crested a little rise, and in the road before me, I would probably say there were 50 or 60 snakes spread out across the road. I don't know what type snakes they were. I don't know why they were in the road. I don't know how many of them were alive or dead. All I know is I lifted my feet up to about handlebar height and coasted through them as quick as I could and never looked back. In addition to some of those stories, these are just a litany of other things that I ran across. Some days I literally was so tired and fatigued at the end of the day, I would try to eat and I couldn't even get anything down. My stomach wouldn't let me swallow. So how do you keep going when life situations like I were facing are so bad, you just feel like giving up? And we've all experienced that. One of the things I do a kind of a motivational talk to children at school, encouraging them to read and everything. The story I share with them is, how do you eat an elephant? It's so big and everything. You do it by eating one bite at a time. So on my trip, many of the days I'd be facing something like this at the end of the day. My butt absolutely hurt. My legs were burning. I was dehydrated. I was hungry, tired, and there's no place to rest in sight. What I would do is I'd pick something like that clump of trees about a mile down the road, and I'd tell myself, okay, Bill, you can go 1 more mile. If you can make it to those trees, you can take a handful of your trail mix and eat it. I'd get that far, and then I'd set another milestone down the road. Okay, Bill, there's another mile. If you can go 1 more mile, you can stop and get a drink of water. And I would do little milestones like that and rewards. And sometimes that got me 20 or 30 more miles of an evening that I needed to find some place to rest. So sometimes you break your problems down into small segments and just don't give up and keep going. Now, I had any number of coincidences. I told you about water. The waterfall you see there on the left, one day I was at about a 6,000 foot altitude up a mountain. And where does water lie? Down at the bottom of mountains, not at the top. It was 100 degrees. I was exhausted. My water was dissipated. I had decided I was going to have to stop on the side of the road and try to wave a car down to see if I could get some water. I was that desperate. And all of a sudden I'd come around a bend, and here's a waterfall, ice cold, a little rainbow in it. It was just like a miracle. I had any number of little things like that happen on my trip that I could recount. Unfortunately, I don't have the time right now. But long and short, I don't really believe in coincidence. I am a man of faith, and I believe providence was watching over me is the only way I can explain that I was here today to share this story with you. Now, that said, As an example, what you see on the left, 3,500-mile trip. I was run off the road probably a half dozen times. I crashed another half dozen times, different things like that. The only injury I got is that scratch on the back of my leg. Now, what you see on the right is once I got home, riding my bicycle on county roads close to my house, 2 miles from my house, a car runs me off the road and I suffer a separated clavicle. And it put me to bed for several days. So 3,500 miles, a scratch, almost killed 2 miles from my house. One little lighter spot is that if you believe in guardian angels, I believe this is probably what my angel looked like when I finished my trip. I told my wife I was going to give my guardian angel a good rest before I ever put him through a stressful situation like that again. Now, all that said, let's take a little look at what I saw in Kentucky, a beautiful state. Start with, who knows where the towns Fort Wright, Fort Mitchell, Fort Thomas came from? Hint, hint, I ran across a lot of these trail markers on my trip as I was coming around. And what it comes from is during the Civil War, you had Morgan and you also had another, excuse me, Confederate Army come up very close to Cincinnati with the idea of burning the town down. And to prevent that, they started building forts on the south side of the river to protect Cincinnati from these raiding parties. And that's where you come up with those fort names. Now, here is me crossing the Ohio River, finally entering Kentucky. Anyone want to guess where that is? Maysville. Maysville during the pre-Civil War days or the colonial days was a major hub for Kentucky. A lot of the traffic coming down from Pittsburgh would stop here. And today it is still just a beautiful little village. If you ever go there, they have some great summer activities and everything. Very pretty. A lot of history there. Rosemary Clooney, who most people know, then the Clooneys are from Maysville. But how many would know that a young lady off to the right? That is, excuse me, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. As a young lady, she went to Maysville and had the misfortune of seeing a slave auction there. And it so traumatized her that she wrote the fictional book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which a lot of people say contributed to such angst in the North that it contributed to the Civil War. And she, again, saw that in Maysville. Now, the rather stern gentleman there in the middle is her father. He was a preacher at the Covenant First Presbyterian Church, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was there in the 1980s. I mean, not 19, he was there in the Civil War era. I was also a member of that church for a number of years, but I'm happy to say that he and I never met, despite what some people might think my age is. Another aspect of Maysville is it's the museum for the National Underground Railroad. And for those who don't know, the National Underground Railroad is slaves escaping from the South and people helping them surreptitiously get up to freedom in the North. Now, here's another tidbit. Kentucky actually used to be Virginia. Virginia, when the colonies were coming together to create the 13 colonies or 13 states, it was so big that it was rather intimidating. So Virginia gave up its rights to this area in order for the 13 colonies to come together.
Someone on Facebook said they couldn't hear you very well. So
okay. I'll try to talk a little louder.
She says she can hear you fine.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, settlers coming into Kentucky, most people would know that a lot of our settlers came from North Carolina through the Cumberland Gap, being led by Daniel Boone in a lot of cases. I happened to stop at Boonesboro, and as I was looking at the original settlers, to my delight, there was a Fowler family from North Carolina. My Fowlers are from North Carolina. I was excited and thinking, wow, one of my ancestors is a Boonesboro settler. I regret to inform that I went back and did a lot of genealogy looking, and I couldn't make any linkage there. But Daniel Boone, everybody's heard about Daniel. He had a better press agent than some. He helped a major portion of the settlers coming in through the South. However, a lot of our settlers came in from the North. They would launch in Pittsburgh and float down the Ohio, stopping in Maysville and other places, usually going no further than the falls of the Ohio, which were Louisville. Any guess why they chose this route? I think it'd be pretty easy. It's probably a lot easier to float your household goods down a river than it is to haul them across the mountain. Now, the settlers that were coming this way, a lot of them were helped by one of my favorite people, Simon Kenton or Simon Butler. Interesting story about Simon Kenton. He was raised on the East Coast, but as a young boy, he was a very big boy. And there was a neighbor, a grown man, that they used to get into disagreements with. They met one time in the woods and got into a fight. Simon believed he had killed his neighbor. And rather than go back and face trial and the humiliation, he just ran away to the far west, the frontier. It wasn't until many years later that one of his family members, as he was helping settlers come through the area, recognized him and told him that not only did he not kill the neighbor almost got hung because the people, since they couldn't find Simon Kenton anymore, had assumed the neighbor had killed him and hidden the body. But because they couldn't find a body, he was not hung. So anyway, Simon at that time was going under the name of Simon Butler. Once he found out he was no longer responsible for killing somebody, he changed his name back to Simon Kenton. But just, he doesn't have the press that Daniel Boone does, but he survived gauntlets, numerous gauntlets. He was tomahawked in the head. He was shot. He was adopted by the Shawnee. It's just a remarkable story. If you ever read The Frontiersman, it's a great account of him, a real Kentuckian. Now, there is also one lady that I ran across as I was making this trip, Mary Ingalls. Mary Ingalls had a family in Virginia. The Ohio Indians came down, were raiding, killed most of her family, abducted her and a number of others, and took them back to Ohio. She was pregnant at the time. The Indians, though, anybody who slowed the war party down was killed rather than slow the party down. So rather than slow the party down, she literally gave birth at night, picked the baby up, and continued with the Indians all the way back into Ohio. Just a remarkable story, a remarkable woman. She lived with the Indians for a good time, a good while, until one fall when they would come to the salt licks in Kentucky. She came over, and that put her on the south side of the river. I failed to mention she couldn't swim. So once she was on the south side, she slipped away from the Indians, managed to escape. The only way she knew to get back home was to follow the river that she had come in on. Unfortunately, like the Licking River, she would come to it. She couldn't swim it, so she had to go up the Licking River until she could find a place to ford, then go back down, find the Ohio, and continue. So the trip took her many, many, many more miles than actually following the Ohio would have. She did find her way back home with no supplies, nothing other than a tomahawk was the only thing she had in the clothes on her back. Remarkable story. They've written a book about it and a movie about it, all called Follow the River. If you get a chance, take it in. Great story. These are some of the beautiful roads that I had in Kentucky. And it was a delight riding. Unfortunately, Kentucky doesn't have any rails to trails, but they do have some beautiful roads. The one on the right, you probably can't make it out, but you see all kind of little chip marks in the road. That was perplexing to me. I had this big wide shoulder, this safe to ride on, but I could see all these gouges in the asphalt. Now, what in the world could have caused that? I realized later I was in Amish country, and that was the horses, steel horseshoes that were digging into the asphalt. Now, if you want to take some bicycling in Kentucky, they have a number of beautiful trails. They're not rails to trails, but what I've pulled together here are some of the ones, some as long as 100 miles to maybe 9 miles. So there's some great dedicated bicycle trails. If you want to do it, this is the way to do it, much safer than what I tried. Now, a few closing remarks. One of my bywords is you're never too old for a new adventure. This bicycling adventure that started off at 500 miles and grew was one that I took on. Here are some of the many other adventures that I've done since then, but the one adventure that I would never have dreamed of, and if you had quizzed any of my teachers, would have said that was absolutely impossible, and that is writing a book. I was encouraged. My story, a lot of people were so enjoyed it, they said I should expound on it. So I did. I wrote a book, Bicycling America. It's now called Gramps Bicycles America, but it has been well received. And my dog, Duke, there, as you can see, he so enjoyed my book, said it's the best one he's ever read, that he and I have co-authored a children's book called Duke, the Best Dog in the Whole Wide World. And these are just examples of the books. And what I'm saying, the museum's gift shop has them. So if you have any interest, contact the gift shop. They would be sure to supply them for you. With that, I will close and open it up for any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Bill. It was a great presentation. I love Duke. Hey, Duke, I told him he should have brought Duke with him here. He's a service dog. He's a service dog, so I think he's allowed in the museum. I'd have to ask Lori. All right, Heather. Here, I guess I should stop sharing my screen. You want to go ahead and put his email there in the chat in case anybody wants to contact him. Bill W. Fowler at yahoo.com. And we're going to stop sharing. And Heather, why don't we get to the trivia question? And did we have a winner?
We have not.
We did have a winner.
No, not yet. Lots of guesses.
Anybody close?
Uh,
Well, let's go ahead and read that question again, right?
yeah. So that question was, how long did it take the 66-year-old author to ride the 3,500 miles?
Should we go with whoever's the closest?
Yes. I would
Okay.
even
Go ahead.
round it up into months instead of days.
Yeah. Were people guessing days? I don't know what people were guessing.
They were guessing days, weeks, and months.
A lot of guessing. A lot of guessing going on.
I would say probably the closest was
Well,
our
the answer is 2 months, just so
Yes.
everybody knows.
58 days, 2 months.
58. Let's see. The closest was maybe 75 days
Okay. We'll take it. And who was that?
or 6 weeks.
Oh, we gotta do math.
Yeah. 6
Six times 7, 42.
So the 50 one would have been closer.
So 70 something, no, 42 would be closer, right?
Yeah, yes, I think you're right.
So sorry to whoever guessed 75. I think the 6 weeks is
You think
6
I'm-
weeks.
And I really am. Yeah.
because that would be 42 days. Yeah. And it was how many days you did?
58 days.
Yeah, because that's 16 days difference and it was 75. Yeah, and 17 days. So yes, 40, the weeks one was the correct, or they win. Who was our lucky winner?
That was Donna Bresser.
Congratulations, Donna.
Nice.
You are our trivia winner. You get all the bragging rights. Were you able to, oh, well, you'll have to contact her and send
Mhm.
us your address and DM us. And okay, so now let's get to questions and comments.
All right, so the first question we had was it a 10-speed bike?
It was actually, I had 3 major gears and 7 minor, so it was a 21-speed bicycle. And I intentionally picked that because I knew I had to have very low gears for getting over the mountains.
And then the same person asked, did you fly to the starting point and from the terminus to home?
I flew to the start point, and that's where I had my bicycle shipped to start. I finished in my my hometown, which I had family living there. So I was hosted there, and my sisters drove me back to my starting or my home point, Cincinnati.
Nice. right? And we did get confirmation from Lori that Duke and Bill will be back at the museum for a reading.
Duke will be thrilled.
Um, Someone asked if did you go the shortest way or did you go out of your way for some sightseeing?
Uh, I did not take the shortest route. I tried to pick roads that I thought were safer, and some of those were terrible decisions. Most of them were very good. Uh, I, I didn't go much out of my way to visit historic sites, but occasionally I would. Probably my best example would be when Medora, which is a beautiful little town, that is where Theodore Roosevelt's ranch was. And I got in early that day and decided I would love to go out to his ranch house. And I started, unfortunately, first thing I had to do was climb about a 3,000-foot hill. And by the time I got to the hill, I still had several hours to get to the ranch. I decided, nah, I'll wait till I can drive to it with a car and turn around and come back. So it was a little bit of both, but most of the historical sites I just happened, like Appomattox, just be passing straight through it when I went through it.
And someone else was wondering how many tire changes you needed.
That's a good question. Reason I started out with pretty much a new bicycle. The first set of tires were worn out at 1,000 miles, and it was either 3 or 4 flat tires up to that time. I stopped at a bicycle shop. The proprietor was a lady, and it was on a holiday. She was the only one there, and she was getting ready to close up. And I told her what I was doing, and she goes, "Oh, these German tires are the tires that you want." And they were about twice as expensive as the other tires that I'd used, but I took her advice. I'm still riding those tires today, and I've got probably 5,000 or 6,000 miles on them, and I've never had a flat tire since. And if you're really curious, email me. I don't remember the brand, but I would be glad to give you the brand. I would do testimonials for those tires. They were great.
Introducing their new spokesperson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people,
Go ahead.
similar to the tire changes, people were also wondering how many repairs you needed on your bike and how you addressed that.
I was going to volunteer that if they hadn't asked. I probably had 6 or 8 mechanical failures. One of the things, carrying the load, the vibration, and everything else you're going through, literally things loosened up and got loose and broke and everything. And some of them, like one, the carrier that on the back, I ended up using paracord and tying it on to get by. Some of the others, like one of the shifter mechanisms in the handlebars, it literally just disintegrated, came all apart. I wasn't sure how it went back together. And the gentleman who was the bicycle person where I started at the RAI store, I called him that evening and explained my dilemma, and he talked me through the repairs. A couple of them, like one time I had to, you've got a shifter for the high gears and a shifter for the low gear. Some of the parts fell out, and I decided that the high gear was more important than the low gear. So I took parts from one to repair the other until I could get to a bike shop and fix it. So anything like this, you have to persevere and improvise. So I did quite a bit of that on some of the repairs. Oh, let me add one other thing. My tent, talking about repairs, I'd had it for a few years, and it served me really well, but midway through, it became rain resistant versus rain repellent. I woke up one night with a fine mist coming through the fabric, and it was not a pleasant sleep. So my tent, I had to do something about it on the trip also.
People were also wondering how many people had put you up for the night and how many meals they gave you, since you had mentioned that in the presentation.
Oh, math.
I could go through the book and recreate it, but I would probably say homes, I was probably invited into 3 or 4, businesses 1 or 2, meals. Wow, I couldn't even begin to guess that. A lot of times I would stop at a restaurant and be eating. Of course, people would, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's going on? And I'd tell them, I'd get up to go pay my bill and it would be paid. So I wouldn't even know who paid it. So there were countless times like that. A lot of mornings again, I got a very early morning start, and the first place I could find that had hot food, I would stop for a big breakfast. And I'm going to malign a lot of older gentlemen like myself. It seems like senior men love to hang out at restaurants and have their coffee of a morning. So any number of times, men's groups would be there and, hey, come over here, sit down with us and tell us what you're doing. And I'd get a free breakfast out of it. So there were lots and lots of times like that.
And how much did the whole trip cost?
Out of my pocket, not counting the bicycle, it was about $4,000 in food, transportation, and other things it cost. But I raised, I would probably say it was right around $30,000 or $40,000 for Deschamps. So it was my wife, where I started, again, she was concerned she would never see me again, which was a legitimate concern. But one of her bargaining points was, why don't you not buy a bicycle? Why don't you not incur all and just give that to Deschamps and save yourself the aggravation of doing it? So, but it was cost versus benefit. Since I raised a heck of a lot more money in that in the trip, it was a good decision.
I wanted to ask, how did your family and your wife especially, how did they react to when you told them that you were going to do this kind of trip?
Well, my kids, as they put it, when the time comes to commit me to an old folks home, they are going to pull out this story, show it to the staff, and they will have no problem at all having me committed. So, but seriously, the wife, she was very concerned about it, and legitimately so. It is a dangerous undertaking. Plus, at 66 years old, I'm no, as you might look at me, I am no bicycle enthusiast, athlete, triathlon, that type of stuff. I was a businessman. So she was concerned safety and physically being able to, I had to take a physical before I went. The doctor had to bless me. I mean, but the swing thing for her was what I was doing for my grandson. So once she goes, well, you're crazy, but anything you can do to help him and young boys like him is a good deal. So she blessed. And a humorous story, there's hundreds, but as you're crossing the North Plains of North Dakota, Amtrak runs right along beside the trail that I was following. So every day I would see Amtrak trains going by. So one evening, as I'm talking with my wife, I said, I could hop an Amtrak train almost any time and I'd be home in a couple of days. Her reaction was, are you sure you want to do that? Remember, you've made this commitment that you're going to do the whole country and people are counting on you. You've got hundreds of people following you online. Are you sure you want to quit? And I laughed. I said, no, I was just yanking your chain, just teasing you. I was not going to get on an Amtrak train. So she became very supportive after she bought into it.
I bet Duke missed you.
Well, we didn't have Duke at the time.
Oh, okay.
He would probably love to have gone along with. No. Well, let me add one interesting story. I think I told you about the traffic. Let me recount. There were many times, but one time as I was approaching Glacier National Park, it's holidays, it's summer, people are rushing to get to the park and experience their vacation. I was on a 4-lane road that suddenly came to an old, rickety, rusted 2-lane bridge across a river. So 4 lanes of heavy traffic squeezed into 2 lanes. I literally got off the road, sat there and studied it for a while. I actually walked over and looked to see if there was any way I could climb down the bank, ford the river, and come up on the other side. And there was no way. And I sat there and thought, I'm going to block traffic if I get out in the road. I've got about 200 yards to get across this bridge. So what I'll do is wait until there's as big a break as I can find, get out in the road and ride as hard as I can to get across this bridge, this 200-yard bridge. As I was about a third of the way over, a car comes up behind me, pulling a camper, and decides it's going to pass me. It gets beside me, and now there's cars coming head on towards it. And I knew he was not going to run into the other cars head on. So he was going to pull over into my lane and probably knock me over the railing into the river below. And I had decided I'd grab for the guardrail and try to hang on rather than go over in the river. When I heard him slam on brakes and I pushed as hard as I could, he pulled in behind me and just missed me by, I'd probably say 2 or 3 inches. Horn honking, both the oncoming traffic and the ones behind me. As I got across the bridge, I didn't stop. I went straight off the road into some bushes. And the good news was the bushes kind of caught me, so didn't hurt myself with the bicycle. And this guy just floored it in the gas as soon as I was off the road. I sat there for a half hour trying to collect myself again. I was shaking before I could get back on the road. So there were a number of incidences like that where, again, I'm amazed to still be here with you today. So.
Yeah, somebody had said that they remember someone who did a similar trip on PBS and were wondering if you were familiar with that.
Not that one particular, but there have been, before I took it, there were a number of books of different people who had ridden. Most of them were much younger than I was. They'd done similar trips. Since then, matter of fact, to my chagrin, since then, there was one young man in Chicago who was going to do it. And he had raised more money before he had even started pedaling than I did on the entire trip. I was furious at that. I needed a better marketing manager, obviously. But yes, there have been people that have done it. Most of them have chase vehicles with them, though. So when you have a mechanical problem or stuff like that, there's somebody to help and run, get parts or whatnot. Being at my tender age, by myself with no one along was pretty unique. But no, I'm not familiar about the PBS one.
And then another person was wondering if you were ever harassed or had any like scary situations of that sort.
I never had, some very discourteous drivers. Most people, most states by law, the right 3 foot of the road is reserved for bicyclists if they're there. I chose not to argue with any 2-ton vehicles with my 20-pound bicycle about the right of way I had. So if they insisted on it, they could have it. I would go off in the ditch. But discourteous riders, I had quite a few. But people meeting personal, no. I was amazed. Even like a couple of inner cities where, let's just say, I didn't match the normal populace there. Were very friendly, very courteous to me, very nice. I will say, probably day 2 on my trip, a driver was discourteous to me, and I did a common hand signal to the driver. And it struck me that, number 1, I'm by myself. He can turn around and come back. Number 2, I'm doing this for a good cause. I decided I would never duplicate that, and I never did on the rest of the trip. I was always courteous to any drivers, no matter how discourteous they might have been to me.
And that looks like all the questions we had.
Very good.
Wonderful. It is inspirational to hear about your stories, and it's good to hear about the good people that are still here in this world.
The people remark, but now I will say, the further west you go, I think it's sparser. The more congenial people were. They would literally search me out. Leaf blower, if you can hear it.
Sorry about that, guys.
But again, it was one of the it's one of those few things in life where you can do where you say, I wouldn't have missed it for the world, and I wouldn't duplicate it again if you paid me $1 million.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for the great
Thank
presentation.
you for having me.
And like he said, you can get his book here at the gift shop at Behringer-Crawford Museum, so be sure to do that. For more Northern Kentucky history throughout the week, check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest Curators Chat, along with all of our past Northern Kentucky History Hour presentations. Please like and subscribe. That is all that we have time for this evening. Thank you again to all the sponsors and supporters of BCM. Until next time, take care, everyone, and good night. And thank you so much.
With my pleasure.
Thank you, Heather.